Good afternoon. Thanks for coming on this foggy winter solstice. Let's get things rolling. I grew up in a charming Victorian cottage that hadn't been upgraded. And it had a dark room. There were always a lot of unusual people around. Busy committing art in one way or another. Painters, musicians, actors, a stray biker, a potter, and a washboard player. They all had big personalities and a lot of style, which made for a valuable childhood. The house was deliberately set up to be visually complex. A lot to see. A lot of music, a lot of talk. A lot to take pictures of. Music was always playing around the house. My sister Shelley is a singer-songwriter, and she travels all around the world playing music. And I host 2 radio shows. Both of them are called Chauncey Pops. We watched a lot of movies. We had family on an island in the Puget Sound and family near Mount Hood. Most of the things in the house were unique, inherited, or rescued. Ruby and Joe weren't helicopter parents, and we all did things together. They run an X-ray delivery service. We drove around a lot in vintage cars, delivering all around the city and birds. And we bought art directly from the artist who made it. A 5-foot-high pop art plaster fire hydrant. A wood carving of a toothpaste tube in the bathroom. Our friend Lynn Vota was commissioned to paint a mural on our dining room ceiling for $200 and a set of tires. He never got on the ladder until the bars closed. Singer-songwriter Danny O'Keefe, author of the song Good Time Charlie's Got the Blues, and no, I'm not going to sing it for you, met my folks at a happening called an old-time piano drop near Duval, Washington in 1968. Once people crowded onto the studio lawn to witness an upright piano drop from a helicopter onto a pile of logs, and the sound it made upon impact was to be amplified and recorded. Country Joe and the Fish were the band. Someone gave the helicopter pilot his first weed, so he got paranoid, hovered too low, and missed the target. A great thud was heard in the mud next to the pit where the mics were set up instead of the exploding cord. When I was a kid, this seemed like a very normal and productive way to spend time and energy. It still does. Most of these people came from the West Coast, and they were constantly passing through our house, which we called the Ship, on their ways to and from Seattle, San Francisco, and Eugene. Like most children, I took all of this for granted. I didn't know anything else. That's me in a corner on my mom's lap, taking it all in. The house had a library with a number of photo books. The usual suspects: Atget, Frank, Cartier-Bresson, Evans, Friedlander, and Winogrand, and especially a gallery book of William Eggleston from a show at Reed College. In 1976, Eggleston had his first color show at MoMA. The show did not get good reviews. His work was called perfectly boring and a mess. The show traveled to only a few other places that year. Reed College was one of them. My dad went to the show and bought William Eggleston's guide. These books may be the usual suspects now, not when I was growing up. These photographers helped me clarify my philosophy. Or maybe it's better to say, they helped me find the courage to not have to have a philosophy. My grandpa used to say, you get your emotions through your ears. Influences are largely absorbed through a kind of osmosis and become part of you. More than any one artist or photographer, the ship, with all the stories that go with it, are my main inspiration. I never defined myself consciously as an artist of any kind. It's more that I learned early on in life that taking photographs was a great way to capture memories and preserve moments that spoke of beauty in one way or another. I always have a camera with me, and it has become a very organic part of the way I see things and keep track of the more beautiful moments that happen around me. It's like William Eggleston said. I had this notion of what I called a democratic way of looking around, that nothing was more or less important. When I leave my house with my camera, I do tend to head places I think something interesting and worth photographing might happen, but that's about as far as I plan things. I hate the term street photographer. It's a pretty limiting label, but in the end, it's as close to a label as you can pin on me. I just want to capture moments that fill me with any kind of awe, inspiration, or humor. My sister Shelley and I spent a good deal of our childhood driving around Portland and surrounding towns, delivering x-rays and files to doctor's offices and hospitals. Oftentimes, we would only have a few minutes at one stop before we had to move on. In the late 90s, we had a route to Vernonia 5 days a week, and I arranged my schedule so that I could ride with Joe for companionship and take pictures. On one such trip, we arrived at the Vernonia Clinic. I jumped out of the car to take pictures of a basketball hoop a few doors down while my dad went inside. Just as I snapped the photo, a boring one at that, I noticed a woman emerging from the house screaming. She was very upset that I was taking a picture of her front yard. I told her I was on public property and had every right to snap a pic. She would not listen and chased after me cursing while she called the police on her cell phone. Imagine my father's surprise when he tried to pull out of the driveway and was blocked by the screaming woman and her children. We forced our way out and called the cops to clear our name. The police said, "Don't worry, she calls all the time," and was crazy. I was more hesitant to take photos from that point on. It took a while to get my confidence back. Once, my family stopped in Klatskernai on our way to the coast, and as my family went into an antique store, these yellow semi-trucks all lined up caught my eye. I went over to the parking lot with my Horizon panoramic and took a shot of them all lined up. As I was walking away, this man pulled up and stopped me. He kept on asking me why I took a picture of his friend's trucks. He could not accept the fact that I liked the way they looked all in a row with the yellow and chrome. He demanded my ID and would step in front of me as I tried to leave. He threatened to call the cops. He wanted to fight. I showed this enraged man my ID, grabbed it back, and went into the antique store and jumped into my mother's arms, pretty well shaken up. I wonder if he would pull over today to stop me if I was snapping an iPhone photo of the same scene. There were more photos taken in the last 2 minutes than the entire 19th century. I started taking pictures when digital photography wasn't commonly used. I don't know anything else besides film. Digital images can be tweaked endlessly for desired effect. One can shoot hundreds of images and pick the best one later, the machine gun effect. This is an incredible superpower that I have no interest in using. I have no problem with digital photography. It just never stuck for me. I use many different kinds of cameras. I go through phases, just like anyone else. Usually, a traditional 35mm is hanging around my neck. Here are some examples of the other types of cameras that I like to use. This 30s. The frame is it's a steel frame that my good friend Ryan Glasgow helped design and fabricate. This image was taken with a Horizon panoramic camera. I believe it's Russian. It's a swing lens camera, and mine in particular, sometimes when I take a picture, the shutter button pops off, and I have to go run and find it and screw it back on. This one was taken with a Fuji Instax wide. I started using this a few years back when Polaroid was in decline, and I feel it's a great travel camera. It's a really fun thing to use. This one was taken on a road trip in Southern Oregon while I was getting my gas tank filled. This image was taken with a zero-image pinhole camera. I got one of these when they first started coming into Blue Moon, and I got obsessed with them. I used them all over the world. This image in particular was shot in Astoria, and it was used for my sister's album cover. All the way up to the Galvanflex 4x5 twin lens camera. This one came through the store, and it was unique. It's unique because it's a twin lens, so you're able to handhold and catch people without having to wait and have them, put the slide in and have them pose for you. Once the film is exposed, the image is there, imprinted on gelatin. Take it or leave it. Press photographer Dirk Halstead was the only film shooter at a Clinton fundraiser in 1996. Like the other photographers, he shot throughout the event. Months later, when the Lewinsky-Clinton affair surfaced, he sifted through his old negatives and found the iconic image of Monica Lewinsky embracing Bill Clinton, used on the cover of Time magazine. Other photojournalists probably deleted near-identical images from their memory cards right after the incident. There are some problems being a street photographer. Some people are threatened, maybe in the witness protection program. Some can't understand why you photograph anything so mundane to them. Sometimes they threaten you or threaten to call the cops. Despite these few instances, I realized early the great pleasure in shooting film. I collect many odd things: short silk ties, answering machine tapes, red shoes, and items with the number 33 on them. At Lincoln, my friends played basketball and emulated Larry Bird. We started seeing 33s around. 33 on the back of a baseball jersey. 33 kinds of nuts, or yak, or alligator. Or the perfect hue of nail polish, number 333. Both my parents take photos. My dad used a Sawyer Nomad with bright flash bulbs, and my mom a Mamiya SLR. My childhood was well documented, especially around the dining room table during the 70s and 80s, when a lot of people were funneling through. Often, the things we bought while out delivering were used as props for photos. Burgerville had a great ad campaign in the 80s that gave kids meals out in fantastic boxes that were also masks. We drove around gathering these until we had enough to trim the edge of the ceiling painting. They are still there to this day. Things like this fill every space at the ship. Almost everything meaningful was available to me. It wasn't like I woke up one day and decided to become a photographer. I took photography at Lincoln High School. Doug Mort, was a great teacher. He taught us the basics and set us free to roam downtown or wherever we wanted. All we had to do was produce a final project at the end of the term. There were very few check-ins. Most students use this freedom as an excuse to smoke a lot of weed. I took it seriously. I went shooting downtown, but the really great thing I discovered was the transforming magic of the darkroom. I remember Mort stopping as he walked past the garbage can in the darkroom one day. He pulled out a test strip that had stuck to several others to create a multicolored silver chemical painting over a boring tree photograph. "This is great," as he used to say. At PSU, I took classes from the late Craig Pottsy. His lectures were dense and sometimes dry, packed with great photos from the medium's long history. We both had friends in Coos Bay and liked our pasta al dente. We became friends, and I hung out with him outside of class. Pottsy thought I had a chance to develop a recognizable style after running through my photographs, and encouraged me to keep trudging along. He liked the pictures taken at the ship. Sophomore year, I went to France for 10 weeks as part of a study abroad program. France was my introduction to a lot of new things. It's the only other place I'd like to live. After my first airplane ride, I hailed a taxi in Paris, not knowing how to communicate with the driver. After a lot of pointing and gesturing, he graciously dropped me off at a hostel where all the students and teachers were meeting. I stayed in Avignon with a wonderful family, the Zeribis. I started to grow my hair out. When I got home, I changed my major from biology to French. In 2007, I went back, this time solo, with 3 cameras and a change of clothes in a plastic Safeway bag. I felt a little more comfortable this time. I had arranged a reunion with the Zeribis in Avignon. Running late, I tried to contact them, but their phone was out. They had made a special meal and ended up eating it without me. A day later, I showed up in Avignon and walked from the station just as I had 10 years earlier. When I poked my head through their gate, they were shocked to see the woolly mammoth I had become. My French vocabulary had been reduced to a few phrases. We ate, drank, and talked until early the next morning. I'm glad to know them. 5 years later, my girlfriend Lolly and I went to Paris in the dead of winter. It was cold enough to freeze the balls of a brass monkey. It started to snow on our walk back from Sacré-Cœur. We were warned that according to the recently passed Article 9, one had to ask permission to take a photo of anyone on the street. We didn't ask this guy. After the '96 trip, I had a lot of slides and color negs that I thought were good. I wanted to make my own color prints instead of paying Fred Meyers for 8x10 glossies. Enter UDevelop. Owl's Place was bustling at that time. All the enlargers were rented all day, almost every day. I went there a lot during the '90s, all the way through the dark ages, when the enlargers were no longer useful, the halls emptied, digital printing became the standard, and the sign changed to Digicraft at UDevelop. I ran hundreds of prints through that processor. I was there on the last day with few remaining optical printers. While in school, I worked at Strohecker's Grocery and Martinotti's Deli, both visually complex places. I met Chris Bennett through my friend Larry. He was just starting up the rental darkroom and studio, New Space, and eventually I ended up volunteering there on Sunday mornings, setting up the darkroom. Inger Kleckitz had the shift after me. We became friends. She got a job out at St. John's at a camera store, and after a few months, called me up when the next opening surfaced. I sat through 3 interviews, one in the back lot for nervous smoking, one getting drunk at McMenamin's, and the final pot roast interview with the 2 other employees at Jake's house. Suddenly, I had a job and was seeing and printing over 500 photographs per day and had unlimited access to any film camera in the shop. The act of seeing and printing so many photos daily made me realize what kind of photos I don't want to take. Making a meager wage didn't matter to me. Free processing did. My work didn't change. Testing cameras all the time forced me to develop an internal light meter in my head. Being able to make a semi-accurate guess at reading light is an invaluable skill to me. There's a very strong community at Blue Moon Camera. Staff is family. Most Saturdays, we play whiskey basketball. Horse, we pick a word of the day, like Nikon. There are trick shots named after employees, like the Oliver. It's a nice way to end the work week. Customers have become good friends. I met Scott Hurst through Blue Moon Camera, casually over the counter, until one night on the 75 bus we started talking. He moved to LA shortly after that. Before my first visit, LA was the last on my travel list. Glitz, bad drivers, sprawl, and smog did not appeal to me. Hearst shows me the weird LA, seedy downtown with Clifton's cafeteria, exclusively industrial Vernon, and Mulholland Drive. My visits there have punctuated his different living situations and jobs. Echo Park to Hollywood to Los Feliz, paparazzi to record buyer at Amoeba to apartment manager. There is a certain glowing, hazy yellow light that is unique to Los Angeles. Every trip down, we try to capture it in a different way. It is this direct attention from my peers that keeps me going from day to day. All of the photo packets accumulated through the years have made space a luxury in the last few places I have lived. I wish I was more organized. It seems that the act of shooting and the anticipation of the image to paper is enough. I often justify my approach by thinking of one of my heroes, Gary Winogrand, and how he left thousands of undeveloped rules behind. Generally, I only share my photos with a small group of people. My family gets every packet and creams out their favorites. We average everyone's creams to determine the best shots on each roll, which helps to see what other people see in your stuff. Computers give me a pain. It's much more gratifying for us all to stare at a print in our hands than a glowing screen. Sometimes the print is the only tactile thing that one has left of a memory. There is a framed photo of the Pagoda restaurant on my wall. I took the photo as part of the Portland Grid Project. Started in '95 by a dozen friends who wanted to show that the ordinary world is full of remarkable things. They sliced up an old AAA map into 1 mile squares and methodically photographed in those grid squares, one per month, until they finished. I joined after the beginning of round 2 and have been contributing for the last 9 years. There are no rules about what to photograph for the Grid Project. If you live in that month's map, you can take pictures in your house. It has helped me stay in photographic shape, exposed every month to a different part of town. Photographing the City of Roses for the last 10 years while the city has been razed and replanted shows you the importance of documenting change. This room could be gone tomorrow, as could our whole city. There's a lot of crossover from the Grid Project to Light Leak Photo Group. I joined up around the time that I moved to St. John's. Every second Wednesday, for the last 10 years, this group of photographers meet up to look at each other's current work, photo books, and just hang out. We exchange prints, go on field trips, and have regular shows. All these people share a similar view. We inspire each other. It helps to see what others see in your work. It can be lonely sometimes without some input from like-minded souls. Bob Gervais is one of the light leakers. We are constantly riffing off each other. Oddball ideas and jokes flow freely in our conversation. In 2009, we devised a plan for him to leave a graffiti in Buenos Aires that my girlfriend Lolly and I would search out, and we went soon after. Postcards with clues came for the next month. Sure enough, in the San Telmo neighborhood, scrawled on an ancient wall, we found this. Lolly has taken me to her hometown, Lafayette, Louisiana, several times. Things are different down there. Cajun country is real flat, and they have alligators and boudin. It's always festival season. Music and food make this place run. My first crawfish boil was during Festival International, where musicians from all over the world come to play. We ate crawfish, corn, and andouille sausage, and drank beer from a pirogue. There was a jug band playing on the porch. All of a sudden, the music stopped, and our ride was literally driving away. We ran and jumped into the VW bus with the band jamming on the way downtown to the festival, washtub bass and all. After every trip away, I often ask myself if I would ever want to live in any other place. I always am happy to come back to Portland. I'm in a good place. I want to live here. I feel privileged to have spent a good portion of my life trying to refine my vision through photography. Certain things you can't know until you get some detachment. I'm a stubborn Portland guy, still trying to relive that first spark of inspiration. It all goes back to the roots. There's a biography of the poet Philip Whalen called Crowded by Beauty. That's pretty much the way my life has been. I feel lucky. To this day, every time I go home, I take pictures. That's about it. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I'll cycle through some of these slides if anyone has any questions.
I have a question.
Yes.
So you grew up in the ship.
Yeah.
Are you creating your own ship now?
Yes. I'm living with my girlfriend Molly. We live up in North Portland.
But does your house look like that?
It's getting there. Yeah. It's been sort of sequestered into two very specific rooms, but it's kind of spreading around. Anybody else?
Have you put together an exhibition like this about your work before, or just for this showing?
Never have. This is the first time I've done anything like this.
How was it doing that?
I think I aged a few years.
So coming in as a printer at Blue Moon, do you ever manipulate these images, or are these just full frame images taken on camera?
These are pretty much just full frame. Yeah. No dodging or burning or anything like that. Some of them I scanned from prints that I had burned or dodged, but yeah.
Okay.
I'm fairly inept at Photoshop, so.
I did some color and some black and white, and I was just curious, which you like better and why, as far as photographing?
I don't like any one better. I shoot a lot more color. I started out with black and white, and after high school, I just started evolving into color, and that's pretty much my main thing. But they're both there all the time. Yes.
Do you think over the lifetime of taking photographs that it seems like it was like a kind of a process of discovery for you maybe? And do you think that over the lifetime of taking photographs, looking back, that there are themes that have emerged in your photography that were kind of something that maybe you didn't notice along the way, but something that was kind of like a theme of interest that you didn't know?
Well, usually, like I said, I just take my camera with me everywhere, and when stuff happens, I just react to it. But yeah, there are certain themes, certain things that I've locked onto, like 33 basketball hoops, just certain things I'm interested in. Sometimes, if I'm wandering around and I can't find anything that I'm interested in, I will gravitate towards, like, I'll go try to find a basketball hoop, or find a 33 or something like that. Sometimes, like when I went to France the second time, I was walking around all day, and I ended up shooting a ton of pictures of the number 33. So yeah, pretty much, yeah, just kind of have camera with me and go with it, Yes?
Yeah, you said after working at Blue Moon for so long, you knew what kind of photographer you didn't want to be. So what would you say to all those photographers out there? What do people...
I don't think there's any mistakes. It's just, as you get to see, so many images every day, you just start to see certain things. I mean, I've seen millions of pictures of St. John's Bridge, because, often people, when they're coming to Blue Moon, they want to finish their roll driving over the bridge. But no, I wouldn't say that. I really don't have any advice other than just to keep your eyes open, and just anything that whenever you say, like, oh, what's that? Then that might be a trigger for you to take a picture. So. Yes?
I can't remember how you put it, but you said something about the label of street photographer, and wondering if, in your mind, is that limiting to you? To be
Well, I think any label can be limiting. When I think street photographer, I think of like walking through crowded, busy streets and trying to compose. I do that for sure, but I think I just find more enjoyment just having a camera with me ready, and when stuff pops up, I do it. But yeah, I think any label is limiting. So. All right. Well, if there are no further questions, thank you very much.